Hi, everyone. I am Dan Kaplan, Director of Content at Simplify, and it's so nice to have you with us today. You're in for a real treat. We all grew up watching hostage negotiation movies, but I bet you never thought it would be commonplace for hostage negotiations to persist in the world of cyber. Well, enter ransomware, an attack classification that really shows no signs of slowing down, and it's only growing, more sophisticated, really. In fact, a recent study showed that 41% of cyber insurance claims this year have come from ransomware attacks. And that's why so many organizations, the focus has really shifted from prevention to that response element. And that really includes negotiations oftentimes. And you're trying to get back what's being held hostage. So instead of it being the president's daughter, it's your data. So today we have the cyber versions of Denzel Washington, who are going to talk to us about the conversations, what those conversations are like with ransomware attackers, and how you can prepare for a similar interaction in the future if it happens. And it very well may. But we're not just going to talk about ransomware. We are going to be examining all types of cyber crises of the digital variety. Data breaches, for example, are on the rise, especially as more companies now shift to remote working, cloud adoption, all brought on by the pandemic. In fact, large-scale data breaches are up big time this year compared to last. So we're going to be sharing some tips to get your security operations team on the same page and being able to prepare for these inevitable attacks, and then being able to get your business back quickly on its feet. So, another alarming stat I'll throw in, 97% of security companies had their data exposed on the dark web so far this year in 2020. So it's happening, and I'm so happy for this really timely conversation we're going to have today with our friends at Critical Impact, which is an elite crisis management team based in Israel. So we're going to have three speakers today. Doron Hadar, who's the co-founder of Critical Impact, Alon Arad, who's project management officer, and Eran Shadok, who is a senior clinical psychologist. He has a unique focus on negotiation group dynamics. So super excited that he's part of this trio. And I'm not doing their impressive resumes justice enough. They have, of course, years and years of experience with extensive Israeli Defense Forces experience as well in the cyber world. So they come packed with so much knowledge. And we're going to make this like an interesting Q&A style session. But first, Doron, I'm going to turn it over to you, my friend, to tell us a little bit about what Critical Impact does.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. So my name is Doron Hadar. I served 29 years in the Army, 20 years as the commander of the hostage negotiation team and the crisis management unit. In Israel, it's a national unit. 4 years ago, me and my co-founder, Noy, established Critical Impact. Critical Impact is a consulting crisis management company. We usually try to help the CEO and the C-levels to handle crisis situations. Maybe Alon will be elaborate later on about our project. But what I want to say that when we established Critical Impact, we didn't focus on the cyber arena. We focused on other kind of crises like reputation, PR, business aspects. But after a few months, we found ourselves dealing with a ransom attack because someone thought that if we know how to negotiate with terrorists that are holding people or civilians and try to establish something for them, if it's money or prisoners, and using all the demands and ultimatums, so we will know how to handle this situation. So we start, I remember the first event, it was different from the regular negotiation that we used to do. We used to negotiate with the terror attackers, usually with loudspeakers or with phone, not face-to-face, because it's more dangerous. And now we start to negotiate on keyboards, in the net. It's more difficult, but we find it very similar. And from then to until now, we have a lot of experience in the ransomware arena. And this is about the focal point that I want to mention. Maybe Alon, you will elaborate about the project that Critical Impact is dealing with.
Thank you, Doron. So Critical Impact today is basically working on several fields. The first is, as Doron mentioned, is ad hoc, would kind of say events such as ransomware or other cyber incidents, and other crises like major strike or union dispute. But in addition, we also give kind of like IR first responders team to major institutions around the country, around Israel mainly, banks, insurance companies. And through the years, we found that our methodology for crisis management can also be used for business war games and readiness and resiliency simulations that basically turns these events into a live action day of drill for management, giving them very vivid option to experience this kind of events. And I think that's the three key points that we're dealing with today. And we're happy to be here.
Alon, maybe you will elaborate about the professional experts that we have in our company.
Okay, so I thought we'll get it through the questions, but as I see you turn to be the one.
Alon, when the founder asks something, you have to answer. It doesn't matter what I say.
Yeah, so we have in the company around 20 experts from different fields, starting from PR, negotiators, psychologists, intelligence officers with background from both cyber, but also from the real physical world. And basically what we do is that we create a team for each incident or for each customer that needs his tailor-made objectives and goals. And one of our partners, by the way, is you guys, Simplify. So we're happy to be collaborating again.
Yeah, and it's a pleasure to be working with you guys. All right, so let me start, Doron, with you and ask you specifically. You know, the word crisis is thrown around a lot. When I lose my remote control, it's a crisis, right? But in the digital world, that it means something specific, right? I mean, attacks are happening all the time. Companies, what constitutes an actual crisis? How can a company reach the point where they're going to be coming to you guys for help?
Okay, from our experience, I will split it to three parts because I'm a military guy, so we used to split it to three parts. The first part to define a crisis is the element of surprise. We find two kinds of surprise. We have the surprise of timing. Usually the surprise will occur in the worst time for the company, in weekends or on holidays. And the second kind of surprise is the situational surprise. Now, 1 week ago, we had 9/11. So 19 years ago, no one thought that airplane can be a weapon to attack, to make a terror attack. So this is a very good example for situational surprise. The other element is the damage impact. You know, there is a variety of aspects of damage, but the two critical ones are the business continuity and the reputation. 3 months ago, we helped a global company with a ransomware attack. The adversary system decrypted 11,000 servers and computers around the globe. And on the first day, we had to help the company to establish the business continuity. That was the first goal, the first task that we handled, and then only then we start to negotiate with the terrorist, with the adversary system. And the third element is the high risk to the company stability. Usually, if I need to define, we will find at least two of these elements in a dramatic crisis to a company.
Doron, I want to ask you specifically, okay, now that something is defined as a crisis, you know, we get to that challenge part, but Eran, I want to bring you in. Thank you. You look like you're in a very nice place right now. So that looks pretty and tranquil. So it's nice to see you. I want to ask you, you know, we're all aware that attackers are becoming more professionalized, more targeted, more opportunistic. But that's sort of like a surface level characteristic of them, right? There's a deeper psychology to the cyber criminal and to cyber attacks. So I guess I want to ask you broadly, like, how do you define and explain the importance of what you do, the psychology into cyber attacks?
Okay, thank you for the question. Indeed, I'm in a very beautiful place in the Jerusalem. So greetings from Jerusalem. The role of psychology during any crisis management, specifically negotiation, and even more specifically, cyber negotiation, is to try and read behind the screen what are the motivations, the strengths, the cognitions, the emotions, the weaknesses, and even more importantly, the decision-making rules of the adversary side. So many people, many attackers are motivated by a complex variety of motivation. It is true, and we'll talk about it maybe a little bit later, that he wants to make money. So he's a businessman, he wants to make money. But this is a 90%. But 10%, these are the percent psychology deals with, is deeper motivations. And if we will be able to understand, to decipher those motivations, emotions, decision-making processes, so we can have the upper hand, because many attackers, many attackers included, they may be aware of the fact that they want to make money, but usually they are not aware of the way this is affecting their decision-making tactics and processes. So if we will be able to understand at least part of it, we are better equipped first to understand what has happened until the point we joined, to make a backward analysis of what happened. Second, to predict probabilities of behavior. We cannot predict behaviors, but we can predict probabilities. And lastly, and maybe more presumptuous, but possible sometimes, to understand how to affect the attacker's behavior, how to sneak in his decision-making and motivation processes and make a small but a significant effect that can tilt the the process from a total failure to maybe a failure, or to even better than maybe a failure. So this is basically the role. And as long as we can do this, we have an advantage over him, unless, of course, he has a psychologist on his side, and this is then a fair fight between psychologists.
Yeah, and I'm so fascinated by this, and I want to hear about building a psychological profile and actually get into the nuts and bolts of it alone with you about like negotiating with threat actors. Doron, though, let me go back to you, because when dealing with all these crisis events, knowing what your attacker wants and all that, I would imagine is one challenge. Talk to me about the main challenges that there are in crisis events.
Okay, again, I will split it to 3 parts. Okay, so the first part is to understand all the angles of the event. There is the technological and the PR and reputation and the legal and the customers and the insurance, a lot of angles that you should understand the decision making in each of every decision. You need to do it in the right way. So the right way is the second part, is the prioritize to do the right decision, to distinguish between what is important and what is urgent, because not every time the important one is the urgent one. And this is the second part. And the third part is to psychoanalysis between all the efforts, because I remember that in one event we got from the Intel guy from another company that the data from the company that we helped for them was leaked to the darknet, and we didn't know it. So in the evaluation and the assessment that we did with the CEO, this wasn't on the top issues. And when we find it, it was crucial to the decision making.
That's great. I love hearing these stories about what you guys have experienced and what you've seen. And Eran, let me come back to you. I teased the building that psychological profile for the attacker. I imagine there's many different psychological profiles, but one thing's for sure, right? That it's not usually the teenager in the parents' basement, right? A lot of these attackers mean business.
Yeah. So when we try to profile an event, we usually, and I'll put it very shortly, we usually divide the profiling into 2 main elements. The first element is, we call it event analysis. And the second is an attacker analysis, a personal analysis. So I'll begin shortly with the event analysis. A very, very useful way we use in order to define the issue is the differentiation between an instrumental event and an expressive event. Just to make it clear shortly, an instrumental event is a business-minded event. He wants money, he attacks you, he asks for ransom, you negotiate, you come to an amount that he's satisfied with, and he closes the deal. And this is a characteristic of many attacks from big business organizations like, for example, Nephilim and Networkers, we may mention later also.
Right.
But there is also...
And sorry to interrupt quickly. They're casting a big net, right? Like they're launching attacks against numerous companies. So they're not focused specifically on your business, right? You're just one part of their larger plot.
Yes. So they're very business minded, and they want to close a deal quickly. So this is an instrumental event. The other type is expressive event. And for example, an employee that was fired, and he has some revenge motivations. He wants to get back at the company, or he is wounded, he's injured mentally, emotionally. And he can launch an attack, and I dealt once with such an attack. And here, the event is more expressive because the emotions play a bigger part, and the money is important, but not as important. So this is an event, and of course, most events have some of this and some of this, and we have to understand, is it 90-10, is it 50-50, is it 20-80 in this continuum? So this is the first task, and the second is to analyze the person himself. And here, of course, we have many, I would say, information that we can use, but usually when we try to look at the behavior of the attacker during the negotiation, in psychology we call it the here and now, and then we can understand and make a note to ourselves. I give you two short examples just to make it clear. For example, how reliable he is. There is a continuum between total reliability and total unreliability. So if, for example, he write to you, I will meet you back in half an hour. I will come back in half an hour with an answer. Okay, so if you can trust him to come back in half an hour, you will probably be able also to trust him to stand for his word in other issues. Of course, this has to be validated all the time, and etc. But this is an example. Another example of a psychological profile of the attacker is his tendency to be a social person or to be a technocrat. So we had people that enjoyed to talk with our side, and we could achieve not many, but some achievements because we could join them in the need to tell the stories, to be heard, to etc. And others that are insensitive to such issues. So these and many other elements in psychological profiling are crucial factors that we try to integrate and to build the complete profile.
It's so interesting. Do they know when they're speaking with you, for example, that they're dealing with a professional negotiator, or do you pretend to be just some sort of low-level security person within the company?
This is a very good question, because this is already part of the negotiation. With some attackers, we choose, usually Doron and his leaders decide if we want to present.
If Doron shows his face, I would be terrified, because he's a tough-looking guy.
We don't show our faces, but we should decide if you want to put in front of the attacker a low-level secretary, man or woman, or a high-level CEO or something like this. And this has to be tailored to what we understand as the needs, the emotional, psychological needs of the attacker. If he wants to feel important and you put in front of him some lower grade secretary, he may be insulted and retaliate. But if he wants to talk to somebody simple and you put a CEO, he may be intimidated or even see it as an opportunity to be stronger and feels too strong, and we don't want him to feel too strong. So there are many considerations that we make in the first assessment. Maybe Doron and Alon will elaborate later on such operational elements.
Yeah, that's great. Alon, let me go to you. And I want to ask you about things that you've learned from negotiations with these threat actors. But let me start by asking, if you're just a typical business and you're dealing with a ransomware attack, you probably don't have that psychological, that negotiation acumen in-house, right? Like, you probably would want to offload this to an expert like your organization.
Okay, so first of all, yeah, I mean, well, we have to basically think, what is ransomware? And I think Doron a little bit referred to it while comparing his military expertise with the first time that we were approached to deal with ransomware. I mean, basically, ransomware situation is a point where someone is taking your assets, telling you, I got your assets, and if you won't do what I tell you, which can be pay or do something else, then I will publish it, erase it, or whatever. So basically, the first thing I think I can tell you about threat actors is that you should negotiate, okay? So even if you're not having that's
a big question, right? And let me ask you this too, because that whole conversation, should you pay, should you not pay, there was a lot of debate over that for many years. So you are saying that
let me give you an example. You know what? I want to show you, because we were called, I think, a few months ago to an event, incident, a ransomware incident involving the Nephilim crime group. And in the ransom note, they actually wrote, if we won't get to an agreement, we will publish data and you lose everything, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, they didn't even publish the price. I mean, they were intended, they thought they're going to be negotiated. So the first thing to do is just, okay, let's talk. Okay, let's communicate. First of all, let's communicate. It gives, I think, for us, a way to gain control over the situation in a way. And as I think you mentioned, attacks are getting more sophisticated, the demands are getting higher, but we can say that even the willingness to negotiate is even getting bigger, okay? Because big prices comes more willingness to negotiate. And I think I have some other lessons that I can think of. One of them is to define the negotiation. I mean, talking just for talking is just as well bad as not negotiating. Just telling, hi, how are you, or help me, or something like that won't get you anywhere. So you have to define the purpose of negotiation. It's either for you or for your team. You can, you have to think what you want to achieve, whether it's obvious goals such as reducing the price or the demand, but you can also get much more, something like the entry point, gathering intelligence, where they have been, where have not, the data was extracted. You can get a proof of life from this data. You can get time, which is very important in these kind of situations. Getting time, you have been given an ultimatum of 1 week. Why not turn it into 9 or 10 if you can handle it technologically? One more thing I think is, and this is a very hard to, I think we learned it on the go, what you say, from different expertise, is to be not to promise anything you can't fulfill. And that goes both in the positive way and both either to the negative side. So don't promise I can get you something, or don't even try to threat with something you can do. And the last thing I think is the integration. I think Doron said it and Eran said it. Integration of negotiation into the whole incident response cycle. Because negotiation doesn't work in vacuum. We have to have the cybersecurity people to help us, knowing that the system is locked and no further harm can be done. We need the IT people, because once you get the decryptor or decryption key or anything else, you have to know it's working. I can't do it on my own. I have to have this assistant. You have to have the insurer on board, for example, your management, the own management. Everyone has to be on board with negotiation process.
Yeah, and that's something that I want to talk about a little bit, and where I think where Simplify can come in is definitely that sort of collaboration, that data sharing piece to really all incidents, but certainly a ransomware investigation. So that's interesting. So Alon, let me ask you this: like, ransomware attackers are more aware now that there is going to be that negotiation process, maybe than they were in the past. Are they going into an attack with the expectation that there's going to be a negotiation?
Yes, most of them are. And you can see it in both the ransom notes that actually demand negotiation, sometimes not even sometimes even explicitly, let's negotiate, let's talk. Sometimes a bit less explicit, but yeah, they do ask for negotiation. And you can see it also with how they negotiate. I mean, they do tend to reduce prices. Normally, I think, from what I know, the tendency is to reduce by 20 to 30%, in some cases even more. So they know it's going to happen. They won't. I think I'll step into Eran's field and say they even wish for it, and it's even part of the game now. The negotiation is not just breaking into someone's computers or systems. It's not just encrypting it. It's not just the money involved. It's also the game here, the mind game.
Eran, talk to me a little bit about that. How do they try to adopt? Like I mentioned movies at the beginning. Do they try to mimic like hostage takers that they've seen on the big screen in the physical world and combine it to the data hostage world?
I don't know if they took parts of movies, but they took a few elements that we know from other kind of events to this phenomena. They took, as Alon said, the element of ultimatum during the ransom negotiation. Usually we find ourselves with an ultimatum. If you won't pay till tomorrow, we will leak the data or something like that. We find the important to establish the relationship between us and them, to build the trust. And only after this, we can achieve what Alon said, the information about the vector, about the data they had, about the technological aspect that we need to figure, and we can earn the time. So we find it very similar, yes, of course.
Yeah, this is fascinating. By the way, to the audience, if you have any questions at all, please enter those into the chat and I'll ask those. Doron, let me ask you this. What if you just say, I do not negotiate, and you just ignore it, and you don't want to pay any money? Like, what's going to happen?
Usually, they will public the information, the data, because they have their own reputation. And if they targeted a very big organization and the organization doesn't want to negotiate, so they will publish the data. They must show the other organization that they should need to negotiate. We, as Alon said, we always recommend to negotiate, even if we are not going to pay. You can negotiate to earn time, and if nothing leak and it's only the decryptor key to decrypt your data, and you have other backups, so you don't need to pay, but you will learn about it during the negotiation.
Eran, let me bring it back to you here. I'm interested because there certainly is that expectation now among the threat actors that there's going to be a negotiation process, but they probably are not aware that in some cases they're being analyzed by in your case, a clinical psychologist, right? So how do you deal with making those sort of diagnoses? It's a lot different than me going to my shrink and sitting in the chair and saying, analyze me.
Yeah, of course. So we call it profiling from the distance. So briefly, we're talking about, there is a methodology that any clinical psychology is aware of, but I adapted it to the cyber domain. So there are three circles, basically. The more peripheral circle, third level evidence gathering. So if it's, for example, Nephilim, the organization Alon mentioned earlier, or Networker, or anybody familiar, so we can collect information from the internet, from professional journals, and for maybe contact other companies that were attacked earlier, and they gather information that is basically available for the public. If we know somebody who was in direct contact with them, for example, negotiated with the same organization earlier, so this is a second level perimeter, second level circle, more close to us. We can actually interview people who actually touched the attacker or someone who is attacking in the same methodology. And the last inner circle, which is most valuable for psychologists, is what we call the here and now impression. When we talk to him, as I mentioned earlier, so I can see, and I have my own methodology, and I try to build a profile, reliability, predictability, rationality versus emotionality, etc. And because psychology has some basic, I would say, algorithms, so I can say with a certain amount of certainty, that if a person behaves during 2 hours in a certain manner and reacted in a certain manner to our initiatives, he fits an algorithm of personality, and there is a larger likelihood that he will continue to behave in this way also in later in the negotiation. So this is the issue basically. And what is very important to mention, I don't want to forget, to avoid, we have to avoid the confirmation bias, because sometimes I have my impression on the attacker, and then I ignore by mistake indications, counterwise indications, and I stick to my own tunnel vision pre-assumption, and this is maybe very dangerous. So we have to stay alert and to be able to and willing to eliminate conclusions that are not validated.
Yeah, that one. Sorry, I'm having a power issue here.
No problem.
And Eran, let me ask you, we've been talking a lot about ransomware attackers here. Tell me the psychological profile. How does that differ, the profile of a ransomware attacker compared to a different type of attacker, someone maybe who's out to steal data, some data compromise issues?
Well, look, people are people. So for me as a clinical psychologist, I try to understand his POV, his point of view. For this matter, if he's a terrorist that abducted hostages, we mentioned earlier the military background, or if he's a hacker, or if he's an employee that stole inside data and threatened to publish them. Of course, in order to understand how his personality, how the attacker's personality will interact with the occasion, I need people like Doron and Alon and other people in the team, because they know the anatomy of cyber attacks. They know the anatomy of terror attacks. They know the anatomy of economical attack. I am like a one-trick pony. I come with the understanding of the person, and we have together to see, for example, if he is a narcissist, okay, he has strong needs of appreciation. He needs people to appreciate his doings, okay, narcissist. So he's a narcissist, but how would these needs become satisfied through the cyber media? This is the expertise of Doron, Alon, and the other guys. So we work together as a team, and they help me to translate the psychological insights into the relevant context, into the relevant working environment. I hope this was clear.
Yeah, that was great, Eran. And I'm back. Everyone can hear me. Sorry about that. As promised, I did have a technological issue, as promised. Sorry about that. Doron, let me go to you and ask a little bit. I'm very interested in tips here. You know, what organizations can be doing to prepare for these types of attacks?
For preparation, you need to do training and exercise. You know, I've been many years in the army, and in the army you are more training than fighting. And during the training, you learn to understand and to know the unknown, and to get the muscles how to deal with the uncertainty. So I know it's difficult for the private or the business sector to train all the time. They should make money, but we recommend the organization to do at least one annual drill to taste the feeling, how to deal with the crisis situation, maybe to check the plans that they have in the company. So this is the only way to do it.
And Alon, let me ask you that, right? There's so much that that goes into, like, you know, we were mentioning earlier how there's just so much that goes into these attacks, and if you're going into a negotiation process, you know, it's not just you know, the security team who's negotiating. Like, everyone needs to be involved. So how do you go about kind of that data sharing process?
Oh, okay. So basically, I think Ron said it. The most important key part in any crisis, and ransomware as an incident that might turn into a crisis is the same, is creating this first kind of like snapshot of the incident. Is gathering everyone together, most of the time actually in the same room or the same Zoom meeting, and having all representative from these different departments or different sectors, and getting this whole picture, a snapshot of this current situation of the organization. And then, and only then, after you have this initial snapshot, you can create some kind of analysis of the situation. You can start decision-making processes, and then you have, and this is something that we face in many organizations, that you have to appoint someone in the organization to be in charge of managing the incident, not managing the company, but managing the incident and gathering all information and validate all information and make sure that everyone follows the same objectives and goals, and to make sure, for example, that the employees are not notified and that the notification for the employees correspond with the notification for the press or the notification for the customers. Because if you create different notes with different details, you expose yourself to loss of trust. So yeah, you have to have someone that is managing the incident. It doesn't have to be, by the way, the CEO.
Doron, let me go back to you here as we're wrapping up. And again, last chance to get some questions in here. And again, apologies about my computer crapping out there. But I want to ask you, you know, we didn't talk a lot about COVID-19 and how there's a lot of transition now to remote working for organizations. And that is causing an increasing number of attacks, right? And there's a whole lot of new areas where people are attacking. So how does that play into in your mind, into the crisis management aspect of everything?
First of all, we should see what was the reasons. There were two major reasons. The first one was the technology reason. The technology system of the company wasn't prepared for such intense activity from workers that work from home. This is the first reason. The second one is the human factor. Maybe Eran will elaborate a little bit about the human factor in home, but when people is working from home, you know, they have a lot of disturb, and they don't suspicious. They don't see all the suspicious elements like email address, suspicious email address, or suspicious link. But Eran, maybe you elaborate about the human factor.
Yeah, Eran, that's great, right? But yeah, we've been leaning on you for the profile of the attacker. Tell us about maybe the psychological profile of the end user now,
Yeah.
who falls for a lot of these attacks, right?
Okay, so I will speak of one general factor that is very important, and not all of us are aware of it completely. This is the element of the context. Human brain has many flaws, but this is one of the major flaws. We are not aware that many of our decision-making processes and cognitions and emotions are context dependent. I'll give you a short example. If you meet somebody out of context in the vacation in Hawaii after the corona will end, and you meet someone who you know from the university or from college, and you don't recognize him. It takes you sometimes minutes and even never, you cannot put him in place. Why? Because our brain, and he says, it's me. Oh yeah, you shared a room with me in the college. Oh yeah, now I recognize you. Because our brain is heavily dependent on clues from the environment. This goes also for mammals, not also only for humans. So our, I would say, basic brain, the amygdala and the brain stem and the lower parts, they look all the time for the context. So if I am used to work in my company, and there are certain rules of security over there, and I know, and I'm accustomed to it, and I do it automatically. Then due to the corona, they send me home to work from home. The context at home is very, very different. And our brain is actually crippled by this difference. So many of the automatic alerts and red lines that I thought are already internalized suddenly became like, a lame duck. I cannot trust them. And the only way to overcome it is to use metacognition. Metacognition means I have to think of my thoughts. I have to self-monitor myself and to remind myself from the upper brain, remind the lower brain, I'm home, but the attacker doesn't care. So I should recall and stick to the rules I learned at work. So of course, there are also issues of different personalities. Some employees are more, personally, they are more careful and others are less careful. But this, of course, is endless diversion. But the issue of context is simple and is important.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Alon, we have a couple of questions that came in, so let's keep this show going. Alon, let me ask you this. Here's one of the questions. How can you be sure that the actor will not come back, or worse, never give up a hold of the data? I kind of alluded to that earlier, and maybe that's a Doron question as well. But Alon, why don't you start?
Okay, so thank you, Harold. Well, first of all, I can't be sure. That's basic in our job. I can be sure that he won't come back, but data shows, research shows that companies like threat actors don't attack twice the same company. The simple reason is that most places, after having a major attack, will put some money down and improve their cyber defense in general, and specifically towards what was the entry point at the same used by the same actor. Now, regarding the data, I can tell you that we try to get proof of deletion from actors that we work with or against. However, it doesn't prove anything, basically. They can have as many copies as they want of the data. And this is, I think, is more economic question. These actors, they don't hold data just to hold it. And on the other hand, they tend to keep their word. So if you get to an agreement with them, you can be probably, I won't say 100% sure, but you can be 90% sure that they won't publish it.
Okay, that's great. Doron, anything you want to add there in your experience? Because I'm sure that a lot of companies, even if they negotiate and do all that very well, and the attackers say thank you, we're out of your hair, they still probably have that creeping thought in their mind that what if they didn't leave? What if this isn't over?
We had a few times that the attackers wrote us, do you remember that we are criminals? Because we start to establish a relationship and agreement during the negotiation, and suddenly they find themselves acting like a businessman, a regular businessman. So they disclaimer that, do you remember, we are criminals. But, in the end, they are criminals. We know the motivation of them. but they need to think about the day after. We also need to think about the day after. So you can make agreements even with terrorists, even with the hostage takers, and even with the attackers. So,
Okay. We have one final question that came in from the audience. Thank you, Maria, and then we'll close it out there. This one is kind of a broad security question, so whoever wants to take it can go ahead and take it. Given it's it speaks again to that remote working theme. Given that remote working poses new threats, how do you all envision organizations safely working with distributed teams as remote work becomes more the main mode of work? And I guess that probably, you can think about that too on the security side, right? How do you, especially if there is a crisis, how do you collaborate across remote locations on solving it?
I think, first of all, practicing, as Doron said, so training and getting used to this platform of coming together for meetings in Zoom or other platform. That's one thing. So people will get more accustomed to this whole situation. They'll be more accustomed to running crisis in such a way. Doron, I saw you wanted.
Doron, anything from you?
No, you said everything. It's all about practice and awareness. So.
Okay. Well, let's close it there. Eran, I don't know if you wanted to make any additional comment, but I appreciate you being here, Alon being here, Doron being here. Let's close it out with this neat slide we have, which is, we always want to give some takeaways. So here's 5 tips for crisis management. I don't know if any of you gentlemen want to specifically speak to this, but these are some good tips here.
So by the how it is written, I think Doron wrote it.
Okay, Alon, you wrote it. It's your penmanship. Let's.
Okay.
Anything you want to add to this?
No, I think the only thing that I find missing here is practicing and awareness. So practice your employees and practice yourself and what is your position during crisis event. I think that's the best thing you can do and help yourself working through crisis.
Yeah, you mentioned the war games earlier. The tabletop exercises, all good preparatory exercises. All right, let's end it there. Sorry about my crisis with the computer crapping out, but I appreciate everyone being here. Our panelists, you guys were so great. Critical Impact, obviously, is a super. They're doing some super great work there. So be sure to check them out, as well as Simplify at simplify.co. We do SOAR technology, which the collaboration piece really can help during these crisis incidents. And we will send you out that slide, those 5 tips, so that you have it. And this presentation will be available on demand shortly after its conclusion. So if you want to relive the masterpiece, be sure to check it out. Doron, Alon, Eran, gentlemen, you were great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.